What's going on, friends? In this video, I want to break down 4 pricing hacks or strategies that I've personally used and that we share with our clients that allow us to get clients easier and also get paid faster. Now, the kind of problem that I see inside of the agency services space is that the main one is outdated. And I think a lot of people just approach pricing and how they deliver their services the same way that they always have, just because that's the way that they always have. That kind of creates a couple problems that lead to why I think these pricing strategies are actually useful and that you should consider them. Now, the first one is that most agencies think and are told that retainers are like the golden standard, God's gift to pricing, and that you should always sell retainers. I think that is a little bit misleading, and I've done a lot of videos on recurring revenue. And what I want to share here in this video is that oftentimes retainers will put agencies in a position where they're actually waiting months and months before they're actually breaking even on the costs that they incur to deliver the service. Because oftentimes in agency services, if you're doing done for you services, that work is upfront. And so if you're creating a retainer where fundamentally the break even point is month 4 or even 6, and clients are churning out around month 4 or 6, there's a good chance that you're losing money. Now, when you add in your cost to acquire a client into that equation, which a lot of service providers and agencies don't, you're even more under the water. You think it looks good because you know that the client is going to pay you every month. But when you look at the services rendered, you're actually losing money based on that upfront effort. So we want to make sure that if we have recurring, that we're still obviously becoming profitable sooner rather than later. If you have a really high LTV, lifetime value of a client, and you're convinced of that, and you have data to support that, you might be willing to go month 4 or 6 before you're actually breaking even. But in the early days, especially profit-oriented, growth-oriented mindset owners, you're going to want to get paid as much of the cash upfront as possible, but while also making sure that you can get them across the line, that it's not prohibitive. So retainers, kind of the first problem, retainers often, while looked at as the gold standard, they sometimes extend the break-even point, and let alone they are the common culprit of scope creep. The second problem is that a lot of agencies want and recommend, and even I, if you can, have an upfront setup fee. Maybe there's a specific onboarding process you go through, or there's some sort of, again, upfront effort. And so collecting more cash up front is ideal, but also sometimes prohibitive for getting some clients, even ones that you want to work with that are qualified, to get them across the line to get started. The third problem is that some services are actually just better off as one-off and should be one-off, while other services are really optimal for some sort of recurring or reoccurring service. So that being said, I want to break down kind of 4 ways, hacks, if you will, to think about how you can price your services. These are things that we've used in our business and our clients are using as well. And I'm going to discuss the pros and cons of each. So the first one is simply getting paid upfront. So what this looks like is a client comes in, and I'll use, say, like you have a $10K setup fee. So they pay $10K, and then you could move them into a monthly back-end offer that is some sort of recurring thing, which could be, whatever, just $1,000 a month. There's a few ways to approach this, right? So you can sell this, and many people will, and we have sold this as like one sort of thing. Say, hey, this is how we work. It's $10K down up front into $1,000 a month. Maybe there's a 6-month term, a 3-month term, or maybe there's no term. Kind of depends on what you're delivering. But some pros of this for you to consider are this. One, when you're implementing, so if you have an implementation-based offer, like you're building something. So we used to build out webinar funnels and do migrations into tools like Infusionsoft and HubSpot. There's a lot of upfront heavy lifting. So collecting a bunch of that cash upfront to cover the expense of doing that work is really beneficial for you as a service provider. So some pros here, it works really great for implementation-based offers or when the setup is really heavy on the front end. The pro obviously is you collect a larger chunk of money upfront, which can often offset your cost to acquire and also really can help your delivery margins. Collecting more cash up front, your gross margin, the cost to serve and deliver results for one incremental client is more in your favor. Now, a couple cons here is depending upon your market, having a higher upfront could create friction in the sales process. And if you are selling kind of the front offer, this upfront into something recurring, depending upon how you position it, you could put yourself in kind of a 2-sale territory, meaning you would end up saying, hey, it's $10K down. And then once that that project is coming to a completion, you're actually trying to resell them here into the monthly. In this model, I'd much prefer you to sell it as one thing, and it just has a setup fee. So hey, it's 10K down to get started into $1,000 a month, and there's a 6-month commitment. And that's the upfront offer. The second way to do this, again, and this is just a spin-off of the first one, this might sound simple to some of you, but the number of people that I see overlook this is so high that you can split that upfront payment. So one thing you could do is, hey, it's 10K down into $1,000 a month, and the person might be a little bit stuck on being able to do the 10K down. And maybe they have a credit card limit or whatever reason, or they want to get started, but the 10K down is a barrier. Well, you could do 5K down on the first day, and you could do another 5K down 2 weeks later. So sometimes when it's just a cash flow challenge for the prospect, even separating that by 2 weeks, collecting that 10K in the first 2 weeks versus having to wait till the next month is going to be optimal for you. Now, you could even go ahead and do something where it's the upfront covers the first 2 months. And so, hey, it's 10K down for the first 2 months. We can split it up 5K and 5K, and then we roll into $1,000 a month. Again, the pros here are helping offset your CAC. You'll probably be able to accommodate more people, at least that we've seen, when you can get a little bit creative on getting that initial payment through the door. And again, it really helps with delivery margins. And the cons are very similar to the ones that we discussed earlier, which is a high upfront fee sometimes creates friction in the buying process. And if you are trying to separate this front end into the back end, you might create some kind of two sale, now you sell them again territory, which again, for this kind of more upfront model, I don't like. We're going to talk about a way to approach that here in another way. Now, number 3 is to just go kind of straight into monthly. And this is probably the most familiar to many people. This is that recurring option, often would be considered retainer. Again, I think there's a difference between the word retainer and recurring program or recurring service. So when a client has you on retainer, they're sort of in charge. When a client is subscribed or a member of your recurring service, you're in charge. And I think that subtle distinction, the semantics in that language are actually really important. I believe language matters, and the way you word things totally sets up different relationships. So when a client is a member of or a subscriber to your recurring service, you might just say, hey, we just get started right now and we hop right into $1,500 a month. Now, when you're doing this, depending upon where you're at and again, what the services are that are being rendered, you might want to say, hey, there is a 3-month commitment. And so you'd add, some sort of stipulation that say, hey, it's $1,500 a month, but there's a 3-month minimum. Okay. Now, some pros to this are obviously one, that there's less friction to get started. That upfront payment goes away and you're getting people across the line, which usually leads to easy starts, meaning clients are more likely to get started. When you have this deal, if you have, say, a 3-month minimum or even a 6 or 12-month minimum in an offer like this, you can start doing pay in full deals, become a little bit simpler to apply. So if it's, say, $1,000 a month for 12 months, meaning $12,000 a year, but they're willing to pay in full, maybe you give them 2 months for free. And so it's $10K if they pay in full. That can do a couple things. You kind of get the benefit of having some percentage of clients pay a large chunk, which is going to help offset some of your acquisition costs and some of maybe your upfront services, while also balancing getting a lot of people across the line. We've seen this work really, really well. A quick tip or hint on this is one of my friends, James Kemp, says the role and kind of purpose of a business is to get customers. And when the economy is off or down or people are hesitant to buy, sometimes creating ways for there to be less friction just to get people into the door is in your best interest. If you're going to do this strategy, you want to obviously know that any of these strategies that you're capable of delivering the result. And so while you might not break even until month 3, you're so confident in what you do and the results that you get people that you're willing to go break even or even negative for a couple months before you start becoming profitable, because you're confident that these people are going to like the service and the experience once they're on the inside. So again, that less friction, easy way to get people to start, having that lower no-brainer payment. Now, number 4 is called upfront recommits. So this is sometimes in the agency world called progression pricing, where you can have an upfront fee and then you can say, hey, we can continue working on these other things, and you have to resell them and recommit them to another engagement and have another sale. So maybe it's, hey, it's 10K for 90 days. And then, hey, to keep going, we can do another 10K for another 90 days. And you kind of repeat that. Sometimes this is called a sprints model. So this might be called sprints. This could be called progression pricing, or progress-based pricing. I've seen a lot of different names for it. And again, a couple different ways to use this. One is that you're solving a specific problem here in the upfront, and you're actually solving a separate problem that builds off of the first problem. That's one way to approach this. The other way to approach this, potentially, in at least the way that I'm drawing this here, you might not having them be recommitted, but they might just be doing, hey, we get paid 50% upfront, and at a specific milestone or mile marker, we get the other 50%. That's where kind of the progress-based pricing typically comes from in the agency world. Now, the pros of that, the smaller upfronts are easier to sell. So if this, by having kind of an upfront and then the recommit is making that initial investment a little bit lower, the smaller, lower price will likely lead to less friction in the sales process. And you could argue that this also happens with the upfront versions, but in the upfront recommits version, or a key out of this, is that you actually can lean into the selling a smaller promise. Smaller promises are easier to keep. I see a lot of agencies say, hey, we're going to do all of these things. It's going to take 2 years to do, and it feels like a lot of work. And when you look at kind of the upfront can solve a smaller, more time-sensitive problem that leads into solving the next problem. Now, the biggest con here, and again, these aren't exhaustive lists of pros and cons, is that there's going to be a resale period where you might have to resell them here. And again, if you want to repeat again, you're going to resell them here. So these are 4 different ways that you can think about pricing. Now, as I'm sharing these 4, I actually am reminded of a 5th that's more of a pricing terms hack. And I want to kind of take you through that as well. And the 5th one is called graduated pricing. I've seen this done more in the coaching world than I have in the agency world, but this looks something like this, where if you have, say, a 12-month commitment, that you have 3 payments that increase over time. So in month 1, maybe they pay $1,000. In month 2, they pay $1,500. In month 3, they pay $2,000, and then they continue at $2,500 a month ongoing. So you kind of have this ramp up period that graduates them. So if you're capable of getting them specific results and ROIing well before they start getting into that $2,500 a month, there could be a strategy for you there where this gets them across the line really easy. And as they're starting to pay, you're actually getting them results, and they're going to be making more than they've already paid you by the time you're rolling into the recurring. I think as a general rule, if you have longer contracts, at least in my world, I would love to get my clients to ROI on the investment with me as fast as possible. Depending upon the work that we're doing, that could be as early as month 1, but often that's usually within the first 90 days, latest 6 months. If this is a long-term commitment, we're having a client recoup their investment with us for all of the things that we've been doing and that we're going to keep doing. So I hope that these strategies are helpful to you. I think now more than ever, you can get creative with how you are structuring your pricing, both to not only get clients across the line if they are moving slower, and getting paid more upfront so that you can offset your acquisition costs and your delivery costs and increase your profit margins and your delivery margins while doing it. Now, as I said, I'm not a huge fan of selling directly into retainers, but I am a huge fan of recurring revenue. I just don't think that most service providers should be selling directly into that. So if you're thinking about moving into one of these pricing strategies, and that means maybe delaying the conversation of a monthly recurring revenue service, go check out this video because I break it down why it's beneficial to sell a project or something smaller up front. Otherwise, we'll see you next time.